kind of in chaos about this time. We were just running over with numbers, and this morning it seemed like we got plenty of room for everybody to stretch out, but it's sure glad to see you here on the Sunday after Easter. I'm looking for some great things in the Lord, aren't you? I heard about the guy that was telling the preacher said, well, you only come on Easter Sunday. He said, well, I'm in the army of the Lord. He said, well, what part you in? He said, I'm in the Secret Service. And I think that's where a lot of our folks was last Sunday. They may be in the Secret Service. They may not show up again until next Easter, but I'm sure glad I'm here today. Got a great crowd to get started with. Let's all stand this morning. Look at our kids over here. What a great group of children we had. Now, last Sunday we had 100 and I don't know how many we had. Between 130 and 150 children. And we've got a great group once again this morning. Let's give them a big hand as they go to class. They're excited. I'm excited for them. They're starting a new series this morning. It's called Camp Harmon, I believe, is the name of the series. Teachers have worked hard and got a lot of things going for our kids to get started with today, so they're very excited. I'm very excited for them. This is our generation, a church generation coming on, folks, so we really have to invest and work for our kids and work through our kids to see this thing continue if we're going to continue. Some of us will be stepping out before many more years. The Lord tarries, we'll be exiting our way out, so we need those to step up and take on and take over as we leave. But we've got a great group of kids this morning. Good to see you all here today. We've got several requests to remember. Please remember Brother and Sister Haley. They're here this morning. I'm so glad to see them on Sunday morning, aren't you? Glad they're feeling well enough to be here. I'm glad to see Sister Wilbanks back with us too. She was here last Sunday, but I've been missing her the last few Sundays. And when you're not here, we really miss you. And I'm proud to see them back. Continue to remember Sister Rogers and those that we have been praying for. Sister Markle also. Please remember Brother Tracy Newman. He's still in need of prayer. We need to continue to lift him up in our prayers. Maybe we've got more requests that I'm not thinking of at this time. Anybody got a spoken request you'd like to mention? Sister Gail's sister, that's correct. Okay, Brother Eric Miles' dad, let's remember those two requests. I forgot both of those. Anyone else have a request? Let's pray for our service throughout the day. That'd be what the Lord would have us to have. Continue to remember Sister Helen Sellers also. Sister Doris? All right, the Charlie Crum family. As I said, remember Sister Helen Sellers in our prayers. She's improving. I spoke to them this morning. They said that she was improving. Thought she might get to come today, but didn't make it this morning. So let's continue to pray for her. Anyone else? More requests? Let's remember our service today. I'm looking for some great things in the Lord. I believe He's got something here for us, don't you? I really believe we've come and the Lord has got something prepared for us. So let's just pray to that end this morning. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Brother Josh.
Thank you, Lord, for this day you've given us. Lord, we thank you for sunshine. Thank you for the blessings that you've sent our way. Lord, I ask that you just reach down and minister to our services today. Let every heart that's here today be touched and allow them to feel your spirit. Minister, Lord, to the needs that we have. You know every need that has been called out, plus every need that is tucked away in our hearts. Lord, you just reach down and show yourself real in each of those. Anoint every word that will be spoken. Allow your word to speak into our hearts, change us, mold us, and make us into vessels of honor. Lord, I ask that you allow our worship to be acceptable into your eyes. Help us, Lord, to lift your name up above every name. God, I ask that you allow everything that be done here today be done according to your plan, according to your will. For this, we'll be careful to give you praise. In Jesus' name, amen.
Well, get your Sunday school offering out if you have something to give this morning. Our ushers, nice ushers, and Brother Joe will take up our Sunday school offering. As I told you earlier, this looks a little different than it did last Sunday. We were very, we just had a lot of things going last Sunday, just to be frank with you. It was pretty chaotic most of the time, and after I got through teaching the lesson, I didn't hardly know what I taught myself, and I don't think you did either, but that's no fault of yours. That's just what we had to contend with last week, and we didn't have the benefit of the screen last week also. And I had some things I wanted to show you on the screen to get started with. So what I've done is just kind of reworked what I did last Sunday, and then we'll go from there if that's okay with you. Most of you won't know what I taught last Sunday anyway. Had so many coming and going, and kids and families and new families, and that's the good part of growing pains. That's the good part of it. Just part that we have to deal with. And we don't mind that at all. We want to continue to grow. We did have a great service last week, didn't we? Went from a goal of 400, which seemed very large, because our most we'd had would have been in the 300s. So we shot for 400 for a goal, and the best estimate that the count could come up with was somewhere around 511. That's a lot of people to go in this facility that's supposed to seat about 200 to 250 in Sunday school. But of course, we didn't have them all in here. I realize that, but it was a great success last Sunday. And but anyway, in the midst of all of that, we tried to have Sunday school, didn't we, folks? And we made a good attempt at it, I thought. But anyway, I'll just refresh you on some things that we talked about last week, and then I'll get into our lesson. Brother Hold'em is out, and we'll be out probably another Sunday. So if we don't get finished with this Sunday, we still got one more we can carry over to if he don't make it back. And if he does, that's no problem either. I asked Sister Connie 2 weeks ago about some pictures that I sent to her, and I don't even know if you remember what I taught on last week. I taught on full recovery. Full recovery. I don't know if that jogs your memory whatsoever or not. It may give you nightmares when you think about it, but hopefully it don't. Full recovery is what I taught with on last Sunday, and Sister Connie has made us a nice screen to help us remember. A lot of times visuals will help us to remember things a little better. So let me put up a few pictures, and this is going to, have you ever heard of people that were sick and we're expecting them to make a full recovery? Their diagnosis might have not have been too good to start with, but after the doctor done whatever they're going to do, the nurses done whatever they're going to do, they'd come up and say, well, they're going to make a full recovery. Everything's going to be fine. If we have been unfortunate, as some have here with us this morning, to be diagnosed with cancer, we like to hear that word cancer-free. That's cancer-free. She's going to be, huh? She's going to make full recovery, huh? All right, Sister Connie, I want you to put a picture or two up here, and I don't know if y'all can see that too well. That's a Chevrolet. That is I believe that's a 56. Is that a 56, Gene? That's a 57 Chevrolet station wagon. Did I get that right? Now, this car has made full recovery. This is a perfect sign of full recovery. Now, if you'd seen this car when it come out on the market to sale, it wouldn't have looked anything like it looks like right now. It would have probably been very ugly. It's a pretty good-looking car right now. Show us another one, Sister Connie. This may take just a few minutes. Now, that's the 56 Chevrolet. I know what that one is. All of these are Gene's toys, if you want to know where I got these pictures from. But is that not a beautiful car? That car has been fully customized from the ground up and bumper to bumper. And if you see this car in real life, it'll amaze you how nice this car is. I mean, it's plush from inside and out. It's better. I don't know what this car would have sold for. Maybe some of you would in 1956. Any ideas what this would have sold for? $2,500, Brother Bill Cutshaw said. That's about right. Brother Gene, would you take 25 today? 100? No, he wouldn't take that today. That is what you call full recovery, and restored better than to the original version. That's better than it was to start with. When it rolled out on the showroom floor, that car wouldn't bring but $2,500 maybe 3,000 on a good day. That car brings a whole lot more than that now. You're going to have to add another zero or two beside that car now. Let's show us another picture or two, Sister Connie. Now that is I don't know what that is, Gene. A 35 Chevrolet. Any idea what that one brings, Brother Bill? 35 Chevrolet. And as you can see, that one has some pretty good touches put on it also. This is what I'm trying to tell you about full recovery. Going from better in the end than it even was from the start. That's full recovery when you look at that car. I think we've got maybe one or two more to look at. That's Sanford and Son right there. I'd recognize that anywhere. I'm not sure. What is this, Gene? 49 Ford. I don't know what the 49 Ford sold for, but that's a good-looking 49 Ford. Gene drives that truck around town to and that's a 56 Buick. I know what that one is, and that one's very nice. That's one probably my favorite car that Gene's got at this time, except the 64 Corvette, of course. That's a beautiful 64 Corvette. If you've ever had a love for Corvettes, I mean that would whet your appetite right there. But what I'm telling you, I don't know what that one is, Gene. 63. Is that a Chevrolet wagon? 63 Chevrolet wagon. That one has been restored from the ground up. Now, what I wanted to show you these pictures for is that gets you a full sense of what I'm trying to tell you about. His first vehicle that he repaired, customized as a street rod, I can't remember the model it was, but I do remember him going to Brother Charles Pierce's house and pulling this thing out of the pasture when he got ready to restore it. Now, he brought that thing back on a trailer. Wasn't no way it was going to drive. I mean, it was rust from one end to the other. Tires gone and old wheels on it was terrible. I mean, it was just terrible shape. Floor plan out. I mean, the bed pan out of it. The trunk part, it was all to pieces. It was a terrible shape. And he said he was going to make a street rod out of that. And I thought, this will never make one right here. This will never make. But it took about 2.5 or 3 years to put it together. But by the time he got through with it, it looked like some of these up here. It was painted red. It was a beautiful car. Probably had 10 gallon of Bondo in it. I don't know. But it was a beautiful car. And he won a lot of street rod shows with the car. And that's what makes me think about full recovery. Looking at something that was off dead in the pasture that looked like and actually was a rust bucket, to bringing it to that kind of status. And that's what the Lord does for us. That's where he brings us from. And that's where my lesson was based on last Sunday. And I want to read the scriptures again this Sunday. Maybe we can put these on the board as we go. And we looked in Joel chapter 2. And the first part of Joel chapter 2, it's hard to believe that he's talking about the same time frame when he starts out in Joel chapter 2. Because he starts talking about such a terrible day that is coming upon the earth. We realize that we're right in that midst of that terrible day that Joel was talking about. I mean, the very same things that he said would be happening, happened. He said that people would be marching to their own beat, their own drum, doing their own thing, their own way, with no regards to God whatsoever. And we can see that in our nation happening today. I mean, it's just right before our very eyes happening. The Bible is unfolding day after day. It's so easy to follow in the scriptures. When you see Joel talking about this great and terrible day, as he eventually describes it, and then seemingly just like this, he turns from the great and terrible day to verse 21, and this is what he says: "Fear not, O land. Fear not, O land. Be glad and rejoice, for the Lord will do great things." It's like he's woke up on a different side of the bed. This looks like Joel went to bed one night and woke back up and thought, well, I need to rethink this. But this is all in the same chapter, all in the same reading. Just all of a sudden he says, "Fear not, O land, be glad and rejoice, for the Lord will do great things." Joel, are you telling us that right in the midst of such trouble and chaos that we're in right now, that the Lord is going to do great things? That's exactly what he's telling us. The Lord will do great things. Be not afraid. And then he speaks to the beasts of the field, and he said, "Ye beasts of the field, for the pastures of the wilderness do spring. For the tree beareth her fruit. The fruit tree beareth her fruit. The fig tree and the vine do yield their strength. That's a full crop, full strength. Be glad then, you children of Zion. Now he tells us directly who he's talking to. He's talking to us, me and you, all of us that are assembled here today. This is who Joel is talking to. Be glad then, you children of Zion, and rejoice in the Lord your God. For he hath given you the former rain moderately, and he will cause to come down on you the rain, the former rain, and the latter rain in the first month. In the first month. And your floors shall be full of wheat, and your vats shall overflow with wine and oil. Now this is what Joel is telling us. I will pour the rain out, and the very first month you plant the seed, you're going to reap a overabundance crop. Your trees are going to bear to the max. Your vines are going to be loaded with grapes. Your vats is going to be full of oil and wine in 1 month. So you're going to receive the harvest just about as fast as you can plant it. This is in the last days. This is exactly where we're at today. And then he says, and I will restore to you the years the locust hath eaten, the cankerworm, the caterpillar, and the palmer worm. My great army will I send among you. As I told you last Sunday, it's one thing to kill a termite and stop him from doing any more damage. It's another thing altogether when you command the termites to bring back the 2 befores they've already ate up from the years of the past. But now this is what the Lord is telling us through Joel, that I will restore unto you the years that the locust hath eaten, the cankerworm, the caterpillar, the palmer worm. My great army will I send to you, and you shall eat plenty and be satisfied, and praise the name of the Lord your God, that hath dwelt wondrously with you, and my people shall never be ashamed. And you shall know that I am in the midst of Israel, and that I am the Lord your God, and none else. And my people shall never be ashamed. And it'll come to pass afterward that I will pour out. Please get this picture. I will pour out. This is not an accidental spillover. This is not just shaking the top of the cup and letting a little bit drip out on the side. This is intentionally grabbing the horn and pouring the oil out in the last days. This is intentional pour. And it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall see visions. Also upon thy servants and thy handmaids in those days will I pour out my spirit. Now this is a promise to us in the last days. If we have any problem trying to figure out where this happened at or where it started at, on the day of Pentecost, when the day of Pentecost was fully come, the Lord had told the disciples, go back to Jerusalem, tarry there till you're endued with power from on high. Some 120 met there and was praying and was in one mind and one accord. And all of a sudden, the Holy Ghost just filled the room. And those that were sitting there just all of a sudden was bubbling over with new tongues. And it was just like a fire, it says, setting on each of them. I can just see people just bursting in praise and worship. Can't you? In the upper room, and they were staggering around like drunk folks. I mean, they were under the influence of, this was the pouring that the Lord was talking about, that he was pouring right out on them, just like hot molasses coming out of a fruit jar. You can't cut it off. When it would pop out here, it would pop out there. This one would have it, this one would have it, until the whole room was filled with the Holy Ghost. And people were astonished. The Bible said that they were astonished and were amazed. And they said, what meaneth this? Where is this? What is happening here? What meaneth this? And Peter, knowing exactly what he was talking about, knew exactly. He said, this is that Joel spoke about. That in the last days I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh. This is the restoring that Joel was telling you about, that this is the way you can get those years restored back to you. You can not only stop sin from happening in the future, but you can get those things restored back. That's the reason I wanted to show you those old cars that look better at the end than they did at the start. Now this is where we're at in our last days. And then I told you a story about David and how his men were returning to Ziklag. Most of you will know this story well, even if I hadn't rehearsed it. You will still know it. And the city was burned up. The women and the children were taken captive. And David had just left King Achish, and King David and King Achish were good friends. Even though it was in the land of the Philistines, David was fleeing from Saul at this time. Saul had vowed to kill David, so that's the reason David had moved his residence down there for a couple of years to let everything cool off just a little bit. David had two opportunities prior to kill Saul and get that out of his way, but he wouldn't touch the anointed of God. So there's a lesson there. We won't cover that today, but there's a very good lesson in that. But Saul was out to kill him, so he goes to the land of the Philistines and became great friends with King Achish. And when they got ready to go to battle, if you'll remember the story from last week, King Achish asked David, said, "You going to go to battle with us?" And he said, "Sure, I'm a man of war. Let's go to battle." And King Achish's men said, "Nuh-uh, we don't want David to go and battle with us. He's liable to turn on us." And the king said, "Well, look, we've been around him for these 2 years. He's as much as an angel of God to our camp. And you wouldn't want him?" And they said, "No, we don't want him to go into battle. We're not going to battle if you go with him." So David was asked nicely by King Achish to depart from the land, and that's exactly what he did. And when he returned to Ziklag, that's when he found out that the Amalekites had came in and destroyed Ziklag, had burned it to the ground, and did not kill the people, but they had captured the wives and the kids and the daughters. And David, when he came to the camp and his men came to the camp, they sat down and they mourned till they couldn't cry no more. The Bible said they wept till they didn't have no more power in them to weep. They had cried till there wasn't nothing left. I don't know if you've ever been there before. In Sora, I think I've been there a time or two when you just feel like you have just wept until there's nothing left there to give. I mean, it's just over. And that's kind of where David was. They had been run out from their friends, King Achish, and now he's back to his homeland. It's gone. And now his men said, "Well, if you hadn't had us down there to start with, we'd have been here and we would have protected our spot. So let's just stone David." So now David's men has turned on him. And the Bible said that David encouraged himself in the Lord. There wasn't nobody else, quite frankly, folks. There wasn't nobody else there to encourage him. He didn't have, his men had already turned on him. Everybody had turned on him. And David prayed to the Lord and asked for direction. And the Lord said, "Pursue him. You're going to take it all. You're going to get it all back. You're going to recover everything." Then 1 Samuel 30:18 says, "And David recovered all that the Amalekites had carried away, and David rescued his 2 wives." Verse 19 says, "And there was nothing lacking to them." I like this part. "There was nothing lacking to them, neither small nor great, neither sons or daughters, neither spoil nor anything that they had taken to them. David recovered all." David recovered all. Now that's encouraging, folks. This is full recovery is what I'm telling you. Full recovery. God don't do anything just halfway. You'll make a full recovery when you come to God. Let me tell you some things I wanted to tell you last Sunday. That's kind of the spot where we got to at the end of service last Sunday. Some things to consider when David come back to Ziklag that I want you to think about. And as I said, I was going to tell you this last Sunday, but we didn't hardly get this far. But know where your answers come from. What did David immediately do? He started praying and asking of God. That's the first thing. That's the first lesson you can learn from Ziklag, is David knew where his answers come from. He started praying directly to God. Then the next thing is know who your enemy is. See, David did not accuse his men. He knew his men was discouraged. He knew they were ready to turn on him. He even understood why they were ready to turn on him. He did not consider his brothers and sisters the enemy. He knew who his enemy was. They were the Amalekites that had come and taken what he had. He didn't accuse his brothers, even though his brothers were against him at that time. So that's the second lesson in Ziklag, is know who your enemies are. It's not your brothers and your sisters. We don't fight against our brothers and sisters, folks. This seems like a very good time to throw this in. I didn't even have this in my lesson, but a lot of times the devil comes in and robs us of things when we are so preoccupied trying to fight our brothers and sisters over stuff that don't really mean anything. That wouldn't amount to anything to start with. If you just looked at it totally away from the situation, you'd think, well, That wouldn't even be an ought to hold against anybody. I mean, that's so frivolous, I wouldn't even think about that being an ought. But we harbor things in our hearts sometime and let that fester and fester until all of a sudden that becomes a big issue. And every time that the devil takes that situation and he just beats us to death with it. He really does. He will use that to discourage you when actually it shouldn't have meant really anything to start with. Now that's what the devil does to you. And all the time while we're fighting with each other, the devil is continually coming in and destroying what we have. He'll tear down your family over it. He'll tear down your kids just over a little thing that shouldn't have amounted to anything, that we could have passed off and let it be what it was, and or if it was intentional, we still could have passed it off. But we let the devil get advantage of us in that situation if we're not careful. So we need to be careful of that. That's the second thing, is know who your enemy is. The third thing is take your position. Now, when David realized that he was going to have some help that was supernatural, something the men couldn't do, you know what he did? He said, bring me the ephod. Bring me the priestly robe that I can put on. He's getting himself in a position because he knows the Lord will recognize a high priest. That's where the Lord met. In the high priest position, that's where he met, behind the holiest of holies. That's where the Lord himself would talk to the priest. And David said, look, I've got to get myself in this position. Peter said that you're a peculiar people. You're a royal priesthood. You're a peculiar nation. The world has become peculiar to us. We should be peculiar to the world. You know why we're not? Because we're too much like the world. We don't even stand out anymore. And that's a bad thing. We should be the peculiar people, but the world are peculiar to us now. But Peter said that you're a royal priesthood, a holy nation. Know what your position is and take your position. Number 4 is get your answers from God. David prayed directly to God, and then he listened, and God said, look, pursue. You're going to recover everything you got. He took that with confidence and got up and went after it. He never second thought about that anymore. He pursued after what he wanted. And the 5th thing is follow through. Don't turn back. When David started, he had 200 men that said they was just too tired to make it. And maybe they were. They said, I'm just too wore out. I can't make it. But David's got what he had left, and he said, the Lord said we could have it. He said we could overtake it. So they pursued, and they recovered all, knowing there's nothing too big for God. There's really nothing too big for God. David said, I don't know how I'm going to win. I just know I'm not going to lose. That's the good part. Full recovery. And God is not happy with us just winning, folks. He would like for us to be overcomers. More than overcomers, actually. That's what his word teaches, that we can be more than overcomers. Jesus told his disciples, after he had been teaching the multitude, he said, get in the boat and go over to the other side. The disciples got in the boat, and from the time they left the bank until they got to the other shore, they were worried about going under. When all the time God said go over. They couldn't go under. They had to go over to the other side. They wasn't going under. So that's something to keep in mind. When God says that you can go over, you don't have to worry about going under. You're going over on the top side. You're not going through a submarine. We may fly over those storms, or we may just sail through the storms, but I believe God is well able to take us through, don't you? Full recovery. We had this is going to be another sidetrack, but Larry and I like to duck hunt. Well, Joey and I like to duck hunt too, and Larry and Brother Bill Cutshaw's an old duck hunter, and he probably hadn't duck hunted in several years now, but there's something about duck hunting that just gets in your blood. I don't know what it is about it. I don't know how it's so highly addictive. And you women probably would not understand anything about this, what I'm going to tell you. But in the cold winter months, when the wind is blowing and it's maybe sleeting a little bit outside, where most of y'all would think about getting in by the fireplace and going to take a nap and wrapping up, you know what I think about? Going duck hunting. Isn't that right, Brother Bill? That's the perfect time. I mean, when the weather's so nasty you can't get out, I can't hardly wait to get out and get some duck hunting clothes and get out there in the bottoms and go to duck hunting. Something about it at 4 o'clock in the morning when it's ice cold outside and That bed feels so good to most of you, it gets to feeling uncomfortable to me, and I want to get up and go so bad I can't hardly stand it. I don't know what's wrong with a man that'll do that. There's something messed up about his mind that'll do that, and I realize that. But Larry and I had really got into duck hunting several years ago. This is probably 21 or 3 years ago now. Larry just kind of got into duck hunting. And I want to tell you about this little story we had. We went over to my grandmother's for Christmas Eve supper. This was the eve of Christmas Eve. And we had plans to get up and go duck hunting the next morning. The water was out. That's another thing. When the flood waters gets out everywhere, that's another good time. That really makes you want to get out there in the flood waters and hunt. Anyway, Larry and I had talked about it a day or two, and we decided that on Christmas Eve we was going to go duck hunting. Going up to Big Hill Pond. We'd found a place up there where Big Hill Pond, Nahatchee, and Tuscumby and all comes together up there. Brother Greg Chester will know where that's at. The water had all backed up. I mean, it had backed up bad. And I was talking about it over there when we was having supper that night at my grandfather's, and Michael Gibbs, which was my cousin, said, "I'd like to go duck hunting with you." I ain't never been duck hunting. He was 15, 16 maybe years old. And I told him, I said, "Well, you can go with us," but I said, "It's going to be bad cold now." He said, "I ain't never duck hunted before. I don't even have a gun, but I can borrow one." So that's what he done. He borrowed his daddy's gun. And I told him where to meet us, and he met us there the next morning. And when we got there to put the boat in, the water, I'm telling you, the water was tall. It was out the banks. And the bridge that we had to go up under to get up there where we was going to hunt, the water was so close to the bottom of the bridge that we had to lay down in the boat to get up and under the bridge and just see the bridge right here on top of us. That's crazy. That's crazy thinking, but duck hunters do crazy things. I'll just tell you, they do crazy things. If they see a duck, they're going to go to the duck. I don't care what. Don't matter how cold, how hard, what it takes to get there. It may take an army tank to get there, and you may kill one duck. But they're going to the duck when they see it, and that's where we were at that morning. We had to lay down in the bottom of the boat to get up under the bridge. That's how tall the water was. It was rushing down through there. But we got up there and hunted for a little while, and we got ready to come back, and we hit a root or something, or a stump or something, shear pin in our boat broke. So we didn't have a motor. We couldn't get back through there. And so we flagged a guy down that was up there hunting. He was going to pull us back, which he did, which everything worked wonderful until we got to the bridge. And we didn't accommodate for the situation we was fixed to be in when we went back under that bridge with him pulling us with no motor. So just as we started to go under the bridge, he kind of goosed his motor to kind of get straightened up so he could get back under the bridge, and that jerked the front end of our boat around. And I reached up to steady the boat on top of the bridge, which was just right here over top of my head. And that boat turned up sideways just like that right there, and water filled it up, and down it went. I mean, by the time it got from one side of that bridge to the other, it was gone. Totally gone out of sight. I had just asked my cousin when we got up there, I said something about swimming. He said, "I don't know how to swim." I said, "Boy, you don't need to be out here not knowing how to swim." He said, "Well, I don't know how to swim," but the minute the boat started going down, that's what I thought of. I don't know how to swim. Swift water. So anyway, long story short, Larry climbed up from the bottom of the bridge and got up on top of the bridge, and we finally got Michael out and took a little doing, and I just kind of clamped around the other boat and rode it down the river a little piece till I could get off, to find a spot to get off. But we lost everything we had in that boat. 3 shotguns, 25 horse motor, boat, batteries, ducks, shells, everything you can think of, we lost. I mean total loss. I'm not talking about full recovery. I'm talking about total loss. One of the shotguns that Larry was using was, it was his shotgun. It was a very expensive shotgun. He hadn't had it too long. It was a Benelli, and it was pretty expensive. Of course, Michael's gun was borrowed from his daddy's. Then I had my gun down there, and I don't remember how much expensive it was, but it was what I had. Here it was down on the bottom of the river, somewhere. Who knows where? The water was so muddy you couldn't see. Total loss. I'm talking about total loss. We was lucky to get out with our lives. We were blessed to get out with our lives. But when we got out and got to thinking about everything, we decided we'd like to see if we could recover any of this. So I talked to Brother Brock Thompson, most of you will know him. He was into scuba diving at that time. Him and his buddy, they were scuba divers, and he said, we can go up there and get that for you. And I said, all right. So he met us up there like the day after Christmas. Had already been there 3 days. And he got up there, and they put their scuba diving equipment on. You ought to seen them out there. Not making fun of them, but it was kind of funny too. And they would put their little flippers in the water, and they'd step back. And boy, that water was rushing. I mean, rushing. I mean, they'd get out. And they finally got out maybe knee deep, and they come back. Finally, one of them looked at the other and said, we're going to have to abort this mission. This ain't going to work for us. So we was total loss. Everything was still gone. Hadn't seen it since. Now it was into the 4th day, and Larry called me and said, I've got a guy that says he'll go down there and get this stuff so he can make a full recovery on it. I said, I don't believe he'll ever find it. He ain't no telling where it's at. It's likely to be to Tennessee by now. Anyway, he met us down there the next day, and we even set up a video camera. This guy got it out of his boat, got his boat out there, and he tied 80 pounds of weight around his waist. I said, man, you ain't going to be able to move with 80 pounds of weight around your waist. He said, I'm not going to be on top. I'm going to the bottom. He said, I'm going to walk around on the bottom. I'm telling you, this water was deep. It's 16, 18 foot deep at least. Muddy, you couldn't see your hand in front of your face in it. He bailed right off in there with weights tied around him, with an air hose in his mouth, run to a little old generator up in his boat. I told Larry, I said, that's fixing to be a dead dude right there. That's all it is to it. We fixing to have to recover his body. And it wasn't but about 2 or 3 minutes, here he come wagging himself back up, and he was toting a shotgun. I said, where'd you find that shotgun? He said, that boat is laid up on a drift down there just like this right here, and everything y'all got in it is just, the water's just held it right up against that boat. And it's all sitting inside just like it went down. I said, you're kidding. He said, I believe I'm going to be able to get everything y'all got. One piece at a time, he brought every piece of that up. The only thing we lost was a 12-volt battery out of that whole deal. A few minutes, here he come, tied his boat to something. Here he come dragging it up, and there come our boat from out of the bottom of that river. 4 days it had laid down there to a full recovery. And you ain't never seen such happy folks. We missed the ducks. They sailed on down the river, floated down the river somewhere. We wasn't even worried about the ducks at that time. But we did have full recovery, with the exception of a 12-volt battery. Got all the shotguns back and everything. Got the boat motor out, and I told Larry, I said, boat motor won't never run no more. It's been on the bottom of the river full of sand. And we washed that thing out with a water hose and sprayed some carburetor cleaner in it, and it didn't turn over 3 times, and it fired right up. And that was just the blessings of the Lord. Now that's another situation of full recovery. Full recovery. I've never been so surprised. I heard about this. We were fixing to run into overtime already, and I'm not even getting started. But I heard about this guy one time. I'm going to tell you another story, okay? If you don't like the lesson, you'll like the stories. I heard about this guy one time that went to the doctor, and the doctor told him, said, you've got a terminal illness. You ain't going to make it. 6 months at the longest is all you're going to make it. You're going to be dead within 6 months. And the man was horrified, and he said, well, I'm so young, you know. Is there not anything you can do, doctor? And the doctor said, there's not anything that I can do. Your sickness is so bad that 6 months is going to be the most you're going to live. And the man said, well, is there anything I can do? For it's my part, I know you can't do anything else, but what can I do? Can I change my diet? Can I exercise? What can I do? And the doctor said, well, there's 3 things that you can do. He said, first off, you need to start eating beef liver and onions and collard greens every day of your life. The man said, I don't even like beef liver, and I sure can't stand collard greens. He said, well, that's one thing you need to start doing is eating beef liver and onions and collard greens every day for the rest of your life from now on. He said, okay, I'll try it. He said, what else? He said, next thing you need to do is sell your house, and you need to buy a little pop-up camper and set it out in the pasture somewhere and hook you up some electricity to it. Well, I'd never thought about that. And he said, and then move your mother-in-law in with you in that pop-up camper, you and your wife. And that man said, is this going to heal me? He said, feller, you're going to think the next 6 months is an eternity. And at the end of 6 months, you're going to be ready to die. full recovery, full recovery, full restoration. Saul was the first king in Israel. During his reign, as he was introduced to David, of course, when David came down to fight Goliath. His brothers were in the tent, huddled up and very scared. He brought provisions down to battle and found them all huddled up in the tent. And you know the story of how David was going to fight Goliath and did fight Goliath, and how he won the battle over Goliath. I won't go into that story. That's a very familiar story. But during this time, there was a great friendship built between Saul's son, whose name was Jonathan, and David. There was a great friendship built between those two. And some people has took this totally the wrong direction when they looked at this friendship as it being something inappropriate. It was never anything inappropriate. They were just good friends. They were just tied together with a bond of friendship, just like best of friends, just like some of you are, like some of we are out here today. They were just best of friends. And Jonathan realized that he was not going to be the next man in line as king. He said, I realized that David has been anointed king. Saul had been rejected. David had been anointed. Jonathan should have been the one by lineage to step up to the kingship. Jonathan realized that God had not called him to be king, and he was not going to be the king. So he takes off his priestly robe and he passes it on to David, indicating that he was under David's leadership, that he recognized David was going to be the king. And this all happened, and then one day out of the blue, you know the story is David's anointed to be king. He went back to keeping sheep, actually. After he was anointed to be king, he went back to the pasture. He still has some time to do there before he was ever king. But eventually, he moved up to the kingship, and one day, just seemingly out of the blue, we're not going to get into this story very far. I see that already, but let me just get us started, and then we'll pick up here next Sunday, if that's okay. Out of the blue one day, David said, is there anybody in the kingdom left that I could pay tribute to just because of Jonathan's sake, because of our great friendship that we had? Is there anybody around that is left of Saul's family? Just as an inquiry, just kind of talking. And there was the servant there of Saul, and his name was Ziba. And he told David, he said, there is one guy that Jonathan had. He had a son at one time. And David said, is he still alive? And Ziba said, he is still alive. He lives out in a desert place, in a place called Lodabar. And we think this is, we use this now for a crude meaning of being down on the lower part or the lower tier or in poverty level. Lodabar was actually just a desert place. It was a place where mostly tent dwellers, that's the way they lived in the desert, was in tents. This was part of kind of the nomad type living conditions that he was living in. It wasn't anything of poverty's, per se poverty's sake. Wasn't anything elaborate. It was just living in a tent. That was their way of life back then, and that's where he was living. So David inquired about him, and Ziba said, well, what happened was when he was a little boy, we were under attack, and the nurse grabbed him up. As the nurse was rushing to save this little boy, she dropped him by accident, and he hasn't been able to walk. He's been lame ever since. And David said, is he still alive? And Ziba said, he's still alive. He dwells in Lodabar. That's where he's living at. And David tells Ziba, said, go fetch him up. Go get him. Bring him up here. Now, let's stop the story right here. But I want you to imagine, maybe not that you're living in a tent or in desert, but imagine where you're living right now, where I'm living right now. And we see the Secret Service pull up in our front yard. Come up to Sister Woolbanks' front yard and knock on her door. She'd probably get nervous if black limousines and armored tanks and people started pulling up in her yard and surrounding her house. And she probably won't know what's going on. She probably wouldn't lay in there asleep or anything. She'd probably get up and want to check it out, see what's happening. And imagine they come to her door and say, Sister Woolbanks, President Trump wants to see you. And that would be a shock enough, wouldn't it? First of all, the Secret Service coming to your house and then saying, You specifically, Sister Wilbanks, President Trump asked us to come get you and bring you up there to the White House. Now, Sister Wilbanks would be nervous. As much as she might not even want to go, she probably would have to go because he has authority on her. This is where we're at in Lodabar. Mephibosheth is in his tent. He's lame, probably sitting or laying at that point. And here comes chariots of the kings up to his front door. And I believe when Mephibosheth looked out and said, "Who is this out here?" Maybe someone said, "Well, that looks like the king's chariots." Well, what are they coming down here for? I hadn't done nothing. I hadn't robbed nobody. I hadn't murdered nobody. And then they get out of the king's chariot and those guards and soldiers and come up to the front door and say, "Mephibosheth, is that your name?" "Yes, sir, it is. The king has need for you. Go in there and change your clothes or whatever you're going to do. Get your backpack together. We're fixing to go see the king, King David. King David wants to see me." "Yeah, he wants to see you. He's calling you out. He wants you to, we can't leave until we bring you back. He said, come down here and get you. That's where I'm going to leave you hanging right here for the rest of this week. We're going to stay in Mephibosheth's tent door, getting ready for him to come back." I appreciate you being in Sunday school this morning. I hope you enjoyed the lesson this far.